Stepmother threw him into a frozen lake to die. His last wish will break your heart. How well do we really know the people we trust? What if the person meant to protect your child was the one planning their worst betrayal? On a bitter winter night, a little boy was led to the edge of an icy lake by the woman who was supposed to love him. His tiny hands trembled, his breath curled in the freezing air as he begged for mercy. But mercy never came. With one final shove, he was swallowed by the darkness below. No one was supposed to hear his last desperate wish, but fate had other plans. Dear family, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to support us and stay for this powerful story. Now let's begin. The night was merciless. A cruel wind cut through Willow Creek Park, bending the skeletal trees until they creaked in protest. Snow swirled across the frozen ground, catching the dim glow of the streetlights before vanishing into the darkness. The lake stretched out ahead, a sheet of silent, black ice, waiting. Laura's grip tightened around Ethan's tiny wrist as she dragged him forward, her nails pressing into his fragile skin. The boy, barely 6, struggled to keep up, his feet slipping on the icy path. His breath came in desperate little gasps, white puffs dissolving into the night. "Mommy, please," Ethan whimpered, his voice breaking. "It's too cold. Can we go home?" Laura didn't answer. She barely even heard him. Her mind was locked in calculation, replaying every detail of the plan. The time, the place, the alibi. She had covered her tracks well. No one would suspect a thing. Ethan tripped, his tiny boot catching on the uneven ice, and fell hard onto his knees. He sobbed, trying to pull away, but Laura yanked him upright without hesitation. He was taking too long. Somewhere deep inside, something hissed in frustration. This should have been easier. The boy should have stopped struggling by now. The lake loomed before them now, an endless expanse of frozen blackness stretching under the moon's pale light. A perfect place. Ethan sniffled, shrinking under her grip, his wide, frightened eyes searching her face. He was looking for reassurance, for love. He wouldn't find it. Laura's breath came slow and steady as she stepped onto the ice, the surface groaning softly beneath her boots. For a second, just a second, her pulse faltered. She wasn't here. She was 5 years old again, her tiny hand crushed in a grip of iron, dragged through the snow toward the edge of something she couldn't yet understand. A woman's voice, cold, detached, murmuring words she didn't yet comprehend. A shove, the world tilting, the unforgiving embrace of freezing water. Her lips parted, the taste of old ice clinging to her tongue. Then the memory was gone. It didn't matter. Ethan was still trembling beside her, his small fingers clutching the edge of her coat. She wrenched her arm free and pulled him forward. This was always the plan. The boy was never meant to stay. The night held its breath. The world had gone still, as if the trees themselves had frozen in place, watching. The only sound was the soft rustling of wind over the ice, whispering through the bare branches like a quiet warning. Laura's pulse pounded in her ears, a steady, unrelenting drum. She exhaled sharply, a thin mist escaping her lips, and whispered into the void, barely more than a breath. Accidents happen. She wasn't sure who she was speaking to. Ethan stiffened beside her. He had heard. His wide, unblinking eyes searched her face again. But this time, there was no confusion. Only the raw, paralyzing recognition of something terribly, terribly wrong. His little body trembled, and then instinct took over. He took a step back, his small boots skidding on the slick ice, struggling for traction. His breath hitched, his fingers, red from the cold, curled into tiny fists, and then he turned, ready to run. Laura lunged before he could move. With both hands, she shoved him forward. The force sent Ethan stumbling, his feet scraping helplessly against the ice. For a split second, he stayed upright, a single moment of cruel suspense, before the ground beneath him shattered with a sickening crack. The ice gave way, jagged shards splintering outward as if the lake itself had opened its mouth. Ethan let out a cry, high and terrified, barely more than a breath, before the freezing water swallowed him whole. Laura's breath caught in her throat. It happened so fast. The boy was there, and then he was gone. The water churned violently for a moment, the broken pieces of ice bobbing in the disturbance. A few desperate bubbles surfaced. Then nothing. Silence. Laura's hands trembled. A sharp, involuntary breath escaped her, her lips parting as if to call his name. Was this really what she wanted? The thought came from nowhere, an uninvited whisper slithering through the steel walls she had built around herself. It rattled her, shaking loose something buried deep, something she had refused to acknowledge for years. But then, as quickly as it had come, she forced it away. No! This was necessary. This was always the plan. She stepped back, her boot pressing into the snow at the lake's edge. Her breath evened. The cold seeped through her coat, biting at her skin, grounding her. No one had seen. No one would suspect. She turned, her movements smooth, calculated. Without another glance at the dark, gaping hole in the ice, Laura walked into the night. The shock of the cold was immediate and violent. It slammed into Ethan's small body like a living thing, wrenching the air from his lungs before he could even scream. The freezing water wrapped around him, thick and crushing, pulling him down, down, down. His tiny hands shot up, fingers clawing blindly at the jagged edges of the ice above. He grasped at nothing but shattered, slippery pieces, too weak to hold his weight. His feet kicked frantically, but it was useless. The water dragged him deeper, its icy tendrils twisting around his limbs like unseen hands. A sharp pain bloomed in his chest as his lungs begged for air that wasn't there. He fought it, fought the urge to breathe, but the cold was already stealing his strength. His body betrayed him, his muscles growing sluggish, his limbs leaden. The warmth inside him, the heat that made him feel real, was disappearing. For a fleeting moment, he thought someone would come. Someone must have heard the ice break. Someone must have seen him fall. He waited, but there was no hand reaching down, no voice calling his name. No one knew he was here. A deep, numbing stillness settled into his bones. The world above him shrank, the glow of the moon fading to a dull, blurry smudge. The sound of the wind, the rustling of the trees, everything was slipping away. And then for the briefest second, he wasn't in the water anymore. He was warm, wrapped in soft blankets. A voice, gentle, safe, hummed a lullaby, just as it had when he was younger. He could almost feel a hand smoothing his hair, hear the quiet whisper of, "Good night, sweetheart." Home. For a moment he was home. Then the darkness swallowed him. Darkness wrapped around his mind, pulling him deeper, deeper, until the last thought he could form, a whisper in the silence, was a desperate plea that no one could hear. Please, someone save me. The night was quiet, too quiet. Frank Dawson sat alone in the small outpost near the entrance of Willow Creek Park, the only warmth in the tiny space coming from the half-empty cup of coffee steaming in his hands. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, rattling the bare branches against one another like brittle bones. Snow had fallen steadily for the past hour, blanketing the ground in an untouched sheet of white. The world beyond the park was silent, wrapped in the stillness that only deep winter could bring. Frank took a slow sip of his coffee, though the bitterness did little to keep the memories at bay. He had spent 20 years as a firefighter, 2 decades running into burning buildings, hauling people from wreckage, breathing in smoke thick enough to choke the life from his lungs. He had saved countless lives, except one. The boy had been 10, trapped in a second-story bedroom, the flames cutting off every exit. Frank had been so close, so damn close, but in the end, the fire had been faster. It had been years, but the weight of that failure still sat on his chest, pressing down like a stone he could never quite lift. That was why he had taken this job. A quiet night watchman gig at the park. No sirens, no screaming, no split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. Just the cold, the trees, and the long, empty hours. Safe, predictable, but something felt off tonight. Frank frowned, setting his coffee down. At first, he couldn't quite place it. Just a shift in the air, a wrongness in the silence. He leaned forward, staring out the window. The park stretched ahead, empty and undisturbed, the streetlights casting weak halos onto the snow. Then he heard it, a noise so faint it was nearly swallowed by the wind, A sound that didn't belong. A crack. The sound froze him. His breath caught. That sound, he had heard it before. Not here, but in another place. Another time. And it had always meant one thing. Danger. Frank's grip tightened around the flashlight. His body had already made the decision before his mind could catch up. Move. He pushed to his feet, the chair scraping against the wooden floor as he grabbed his coat. Stepping outside, the cold hit him like a slap, sharp and biting. His breath curled in the air as he scanned the park, searching for something. Anything that would explain the unease gripping his chest. The snow should have been smooth, untouched. But was it? His boots crunched over the ice-crusted path as he moved toward the lake, each step feeling heavier than the last. A whisper of doubt passed through his mind, telling him that maybe he was imagining things, that maybe tonight was just another quiet night. But Frank knew better, and with each step, he was walking straight toward a moment that would change everything. Frank had seen plenty of horrors in his lifetime. Collapsing buildings, infernos swallowing homes whole, the helpless trapped behind walls of flame. But nothing, not the smoke, not the wreckage, not even the screams, had ever filled him with the same dread as what he saw now. A gaping hole in the ice. The lake, still and vast just moments before, now churned with slow, expanding ripples. The jagged edges of the broken ice gleamed under the weak moonlight, sharp as shattered glass. The water below was black, fathomless, and utterly silent. Something or someone had gone in. Frank's breath caught, his pulse pounding so loudly he could hear it in his ears. His hand flew to his belt, fingers fumbling for his radio. No, faster. His phone. 911. Call first, act second. That was the rule. But as he pressed the phone to his ear, something deeper, more instinctual, screamed at him. There's no time. The dispatcher's voice crackled on the line, but he was already moving. Boots off, coat off. Go. The freezing air clawed at his skin as he kicked off his heavy work boots, his breath coming in sharp bursts. He stepped onto the ice, feeling it groan under his weight. Too fast and it would break again. Too slow and the kid would be gone. Frank dropped to his knees, flattening himself against the surface, inching forward with the careful, practiced movements of a man who had spent years pulling people from impossible places. He knew how ice worked. He knew its tricks, its weaknesses. He spread his weight, forcing himself to stay calm. His heart told him to hurry. His training told him one wrong move, and they'd both be lost. The hole was close now, the water blacker than the sky above it. He didn't hesitate. He couldn't. With one final push forward, Frank threw himself into the abyss. The cold was instant, crippling. It slammed into him, wrapping around his body like a living thing, seizing his chest in a vice grip. His breath vanished, his muscles locked. The lake's depths pulled at him, dragging him into absolute darkness. For a moment, panic flickered. Where was up? Where was the hole? Everything was black. His vision blurred, the dim light above already fading. His lungs screamed for air, but he forced himself to keep searching. His arms shot forward, sweeping blindly. Then, his fingers brushed something. Fabric. He lunged, grabbing hold. An arm. Too still, too cold. Dead weight. No movement, no resistance. Frank's chest tightened. Too late? No. There was still time. There had to be. With everything he had left, he pulled. The weight in Frank's arms felt impossibly heavy. His muscles burned, his lungs screamed for air. But he wouldn't let go. Wouldn't stop. Not now. Not when he had him. Not this time. Breaking the surface felt like being reborn into fire. The air was sharp and vicious, searing down his throat as he gasped. The cold wind sliced across his soaked skin like 1,000 tiny knives, but none of it mattered. He had the boy. Ethan's small, lifeless body hung limp in his grasp, his soaked clothes clinging to his frame like dead weight. His lips were a sickly shade of blue. His skin was ghost pale, too still. Frank's foot found solid ground as he stumbled toward the shore, dragging Ethan with him, his breath coming in ragged gulps. The snow crunched beneath his knees as he collapsed onto the frozen earth, cradling the boy against him for a fleeting second before laying him down. The silence was unbearable. Frank leaned over Ethan's tiny body, his fingers pressing against the boy's throat. Searching, searching, nothing. His own chest tightened as another memory slammed into him. Smoke, flames, a child's cry swallowed by the roar of fire. Hands reaching, just not fast enough. A 10-year-old boy lost to the past. Number not again. "Come on, kid," he rasped, his hands shaking as he pressed down on Ethan's small chest. His fingers trembled from more than just the cold. "Breathe, damn it." He counted the compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. He tipped Ethan's chin back, pinched his nose, and forced his own breath into the boy's still lungs. "Not this time," he whispered. The wind howled around them, indifferent to the fight unfolding in the snow. "Come on," he pleaded. "Come back." He kept pushing, kept breathing, kept fighting. Then, the smallest movement, a weak, shallow breath escaped Ethan's lips, a sound so faint that, for a moment, Frank thought he had imagined it. But then the boy jerked slightly, his body giving a single, fragile cough. Frank let out a sharp, broken laugh. Relief crashed over him so fast he almost didn't notice the flashing lights in the distance. The sirens were coming. Help was coming. His body finally gave out. Frank slumped backward into the snow, his chest heaving, his frozen fingers curled against his palms. He let his eyes slip closed for just a second, his breath clouding in the icy air. Ethan was alive, and for the first time in years, so was he. Daniel Carter had spent his entire life believing that control was everything. Every decision, every meeting, every calculated risk had led him to where he was, a man in complete command of his world, a world built on precision, strategy, and results. There was no room for disorder, no room for mistakes. But tonight, his world was shattering. The restaurant had been warm, filled with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the scent of expensive wine, and seared steak. A deal-closing kind of night. The kind where numbers were crunched, hands were shaken, futures were secured. Then his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, almost silenced it, and returned to the conversation like he had so many times before. But something, instinct, fate, something darker, made him glance at the screen. St. Mary's Hospital. The room around him blurred. He didn't remember pushing back his chair, didn't remember murmuring some excuse as he left the table. All he knew was that within seconds he was outside, the biting wind slamming into him, numbing the edges of his thoughts as he pressed the phone to his ear. "Mr. Carter, this is St. Mary's. Your son." A voice, calm, professional, but the words that followed ripped through him, gutting him where he stood. "Ethan, critical condition, nearly drowned, cold exposure." The world tilted. His son, his baby boy. The valet barely had time to move before Daniel yanked open the door of his car, sliding behind the wheel, hands shaking as he jammed the key into the ignition. He had driven these streets 1,000 times, but tonight they felt unfamiliar. Alien. The headlights cut through the swirling snow, illuminating the slick pavement ahead. But his vision tunneled. The speedometer climbed. His knuckles turned white against the steering wheel. A voice, small, innocent, echoed in his mind, unbidden, a memory from just weeks ago. "Dad, can we play?" He had been at his desk. Emails, spreadsheets, reports, always something that needed his attention. "Not now, buddy. Maybe later." Ethan had nodded like he always did, not arguing, not whining, just accepting. Because Ethan had learned that later never came. The realization struck like a fist to the chest, knocking the breath from him. How many signs had he missed? How many moments had he let slip through his fingers, convincing himself that there was always more time? His stomach clenched, his heart a hammer in his chest, because now there might not be any time left at all. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow over the polished tile floors. The air smelled of antiseptic and something colder, something that settled deep in Daniel Carter's chest as he strode through the halls, his footsteps too fast, too uneven. He barely heard the nurses murmuring at the desk. barely registered the doctor who stopped him with a clipped, professional tone, giving him the details of his son's condition. Hypothermia, mild pulmonary edema, but stable. Stable. That should have been a relief, but it wasn't. Because when Daniel stepped into the hospital room, the sight of Ethan nearly broke him. His son, his bright, laughing, full of life little boy, looked so small, too pale, lips tinged with the remnants of blue, his tiny hands resting limp against the stark white sheets. Wires snaked from his chest, monitors blinking with steady rhythmic beeps, as if each one was fighting to tether him back to this world. Daniel sank into the chair beside the bed, gripping Ethan's frail hand in both of his, pressing his forehead against it for just a moment. He should have been here sooner. He should have never let this happen. A soft sound, barely more than a whisper, broke through the quiet. Daniel's head snapped up. Ethan's eyelids fluttered, his small face twitching as if caught between dreams and reality. And then, so faint it was almost swallowed by the hum of the machines, he murmured, "Mother pushed me." Daniel's blood turned to ice. His breath stalled. For a second, his mind refused to process it, refused to accept what those words meant. Mother pushed me. A sick, twisting nausea coiled in his stomach, drowning out every logical thought, every excuse that tried to form. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some horrible twist of fate. Someone, Laura, had done this. His wife, the woman he had trusted, the woman who had kissed Ethan's forehead at bedtime, who had laughed at the dinner table, who had stood beside him in photographs, smiling as if she belonged there. Daniel's grip on Ethan's hand tightened as a storm raged inside him. How had he let a monster into his home? A sharp knock at the door shattered his spiraling thoughts. Daniel turned as two police officers stepped inside, their expressions grim. "We need to talk," one of them said. "It's about Laura." Daniel swallowed, his throat raw, his heart a hammer against his ribs. Because deep down, he already knew. He knew that whatever they were about to tell him would be worse than anything he had imagined. The neon glow of the roadside diner flickered weakly against the snow-covered pavement, casting long, shifting shadows through the windows. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and greasy food, the low hum of the television filling the near-empty space. Laura sat in the corner booth, a cup of untouched coffee in front of her, steam curling lazily into the air. Her hands, now adorned with cheap drugstore rings, rested on the cracked Formica table. The dark auburn hair that framed her face was new, freshly dyed, pulled into a loose ponytail. Large sunglasses concealed the sharp angles of her face, hiding her from the world, or rather, hiding the world from her. She kept her posture relaxed, her expression neutral, just another traveler passing through. But inside, beneath the careful disguise, rage coiled like a tightening noose. The small TV mounted above the counter droned on, the local news anchor's voice monotone, unremarkable until she heard his name. In a miraculous turn of events, 6-year-old Ethan Carter is expected to recover after nearly drowning in Willow Creek Lake last night. Officials credit local night watchman Frank Dawson for... Her fingers curled into a vice-like grip on the table's edge. Her pulse slowed, her breath evening out, but her eyes never left the screen. He wasn't supposed to survive. For a moment, she simply stared, her mind racing, calculating. She had done everything right, the planning, the execution. It should have been perfect. But the boy lived, and that changed everything. Laura's gaze drifted downward as she reached into her bag, pulling out a worn leather wallet. Inside, the collection of fake IDs was neatly stacked, each with a different name, a different life. Her fingers flipped through them absently. She could disappear. She had done it before. But something kept her rooted to the spot. She wasn't finished yet. Reaching into the pocket of her jacket, she pulled out her burner phone, a cheap, disposable thing, already set up to be wiped clean after one last call. Her thumb hovered over a number she hadn't dialed in months. She exhaled slowly, then pressed send. The line rang once, twice, then a voice, calm, male, answered. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again." Laura's lips curved slightly. "I need a favor," she murmured. Because if Ethan Carter was still breathing, then she had one last thing to do. Daniel Carter had never known true fear. Not in the boardrooms where millions were at stake. Not in the sleepless nights spent chasing success. Not even in the moments when life had pressed its weight against him, daring him to falter. But now he understood it. It was the kind of fear that gripped him in the quiet of the hospital room, watching his son's fragile chest rise and fall beneath the tangle of wires and tubes. The kind that wrapped around his ribs, suffocating, refusing to let go. The kind that turned his blood ice cold the moment his phone rang. He almost didn't answer. The number was blocked, but something, instinct, dread, rage, made him swipe the screen and press the phone to his ear. And then, "You were so easy to fool, Daniel." The voice sent a sharp electric shock through his spine. Low, amused, familiar. "Laura." His grip on the phone tightened, his knuckles turning white. "Where the hell are you?" His voice came out low, controlled, but every muscle in his body coiled, ready to snap. A soft chuckle drifted through the line. "Oh, Danny," she murmured, her tone almost affectionate. "Still pretending you're in control. That's adorable." He clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached. "You won't get near him again," he ground out. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then, another laugh. Software. Unhurried. The kind that sent a slow creeping chill through his veins. "Oh, Daniel," she sighed as if speaking to a child. Then her voice dropped, a whisper of pure malice. "You have no idea how close I already am." The line went dead. Daniel didn't move. For a full second, his mind refused to process what he'd just heard. Then he was on his feet, shoving the chair back so hard it crashed against the wall. His pulse thundered in his ears. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. She was watching, she was waiting, and she wasn't finished yet. Under the heavy night sky, police cars cut through the snow-covered roads, their flashing lights casting eerie reflections against the frost-laced trees. They had found her. A series of small but damning clues, security footage from a roadside gas station, a suspicious credit card charge, had led them straight to Pine Hollow, to a rundown cabin tucked away in the dense woods. Daniel sat rigid in the passenger seat, his hands clenched into fists against his knees. "We can handle this," Detective Harper said, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. "No." Daniel's voice was firm, unshakable. "I need to face her myself." Harper shot him a wary glance. "We can't guarantee your safety if this ends tonight, and it ends with me." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant wail of sirens in the wind. Finally, Harper exhaled, nodding once. "You've got 20 minutes, then we go in." Daniel didn't respond, because in his mind there was only one thought. Finish this. The cabin emerged from the darkness, nestled between skeletal trees. It was a forgotten thing, its wooden frame weathered, windows black and hollow. The headlights washed over its cracked exterior, illuminating a porch coated in frost. The convoy of police vehicles came to a stop. Officers moved into position, weapons ready, but no one advanced. Not yet. Not until Daniel went first. His boots crunched over the frozen ground as he stepped forward, every breath curling in the frigid air. He felt the weight of unseen eyes watching from the trees, the sense that he was crossing an invisible line. Then, the front door creaked open. A figure emerged into the dim light. Laura. Her hair was different, deep auburn now, freshly cut. Her clothes were simple, unassuming, jeans, a thick sweater, nothing out of place. But her eyes, those remained the same, sharp, calculating, unrepentant. She tilted her head, a slow smile creeping across her lips. "Danny," she murmured, voice smooth as silk. "You made it." There was no fear in her, no hesitation, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Daniel didn't speak. His jaw clenched, his heart beat a slow, measured drumbeat of rage. Behind him, the clock had already started counting down. The cabin was small, suffocating in its silence. The dim glow of a single lantern flickered against the cracked wooden walls, casting long, shifting shadows. The air was thick with dust, stale like a place untouched for years. Except it had been touched, lived in. Used. Daniel's eyes swept over the table near the center of the room. Passports, fake IDs, stacks of cash, a loaded gun. Her entire existence, a carefully crafted lie laid bare before him. Laura followed his gaze and let out a soft, amused chuckle. "Let me guess," she mused, leaning casually against the chair, completely unfazed. "You're shocked, betrayed, maybe even a little heartbroken?" Daniel didn't take the bait, not this time. "You pushed him," he said, his voice low, steady. "You tried to kill my son." Laura exhaled dramatically, rolling her eyes. "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds so—" She waved a hand, as if searching for the right word. "Unforgivable." Daniel's fist clenched. "You used me. You used Ethan." Her smirk widened. "Of course I did, Danny. Do you think any of this was real? Do you think I married you because I loved you?" She shook her head, laughing softly. "You were just another step in the plan. Another stupid, lonely man who thought love meant safety." Daniel's stomach twisted, but his expression remained stone cold. Laura sighed, as if suddenly bored. "Honestly, I thought you'd be smarter, maybe a little harder to fool. But you were so easy, so desperate to believe in your perfect little family." Daniel took a slow step forward. "You're done running, Laura." Her body stiffened, just for a second. For the first time since he'd known her, something flickered behind her eyes, a crack in the mask. She blinked once, twice, as if suddenly remembering something she hadn't meant to. Daniel saw it, a flash of something buried deep, something old, a child, curled up in the dark. A father's drunken rage, the sharp crack of a belt, the quiet sobs of a girl who learned too soon that no one would come to save her. A mother who looked away, a world that taught her that children were nothing more than burdens, a world that turned her into this. Daniel's stomach twisted. Pity, hate, grief, rage, all of it tangled inside him, but none of it mattered now. Outside, sirens wailed, growing louder, their lights flashing against the frost-covered window. Laura's eyes darted toward the door, calculating. She had seconds left, and then, in a single fluid motion, she lunged for the gun. Daniel moved faster. He crashed into her, knocking the chair over, slamming her against the table. She fought, wild, desperate, nails clawing, legs kicking. The gun hit the floor. She twisted, fingers scrambling for it. A gunshot ripped through the cabin. For a moment, nothing moved. The echo rang in Daniel's ears, deafening. Then, Laura swayed. Her breath hitched, her hands trembling as she lifted them, pressing them against her side. Blood. She looked down, then up at him, and for the first time there was no smirk, just shock, just silence. The cabin was silent except for the ragged sound of Laura's breathing. She stood there, her body swaying slightly, one hand pressed to her side, dark blood seeping between her fingers. The smirk was gone, replaced by something colder, something she hadn't expected to feel. Defeat. Daniel towered over her, his chest rising and falling, the gun still clutched in his hand. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, drowning out everything else. This was it. Everything she had done, to Ethan, to him, to who knows how many others, ended right here. His finger tensed against the trigger. Laura let out a soft, breathless chuckle. "What are you waiting for?" she murmured, her lips curling slightly. "Go on, finish it." Daniel's grip tightened. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But then, "Dad." The small, trembling voice cut through everything. Daniel froze. His breath stalled. His pulse stuttered. Slowly, so slowly, he turned. And there, standing in the open doorway, was Ethan. The boy's tiny frame was backlit by the flashing red and blue of the police lights. His hospital gown hung loosely on his small body, the sleeves too long, swallowing his thin arms. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, his breathing unsteady, his eyes wide. Not with fear, but with something else. Something worse. He was looking at Daniel, at the gun in his father's hand, at the man he trusted most in the world, standing on the edge of something Ethan didn't understand, but knew was wrong. Daniel's fingers twitched. The rage, the pain, the weight of everything Laura had done. It all clashed violently with the one thing that mattered most: his son. Ethan was watching him become something else. Daniel's breath hitched. His hand, still trembling, slowly lowered the gun. A sob tore from Ethan's throat, and before Daniel could move, his son rushed forward, throwing himself into his arms. Daniel caught him, kneeling, holding on so tightly he could barely breathe. And just like that, the storm inside him broke. The cabin door slammed open, the sound shattering the heavy silence. Flashlights cut through the dim room as officers poured in, their boots hammering against the creaking floorboards. "Hands where we can see them," a voice commanded. In an instant, Laura was on the ground. Two officers pinned her down, wrenching her arms behind her back, pressing her face into the cold, splintered wood. She let out a ragged, breathless laugh, defiant even now, even with blood staining her sweater, even with cuffs locking around her wrists. "Really, Danny?" she rasped, her lips twisting into a cruel smirk. "You had the chance. You had me." She gave a hollow chuckle, shaking her head. "And you let it slip away. You're weaker than I thought." Daniel didn't respond, didn't even look at her, because she was nothing now, nothing but a voice from a life he was ready to leave behind. His arms were still wrapped around Ethan, holding his son as if letting go would make all of this disappear. And for the first time in far too long, Daniel knew exactly what mattered. Not revenge, not the years of regret, not the rage that had nearly consumed him. Ethan, his son, his future. And as the officers dragged Laura out into the cold night, still spitting venom, still trying to sink her claws into him one last time, Daniel never once looked back. The soft beeping of the hospital monitors filled the quiet room, a steady rhythm of life. The harsh fluorescent lighting had been dimmed, allowing only the soft glow from the window to spill across the crisp, white sheets. Ethan lay nestled beneath a thick blanket, his small chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. His face, though still pale, no longer carried the haunted look it had before. There was warmth now, a quiet safety. Frank Dawson stood in the doorway, watching. He hadn't wanted to come at first. For years, he had carried the weight of a failure that never loosened its grip, a memory that had haunted him in every quiet moment. A child lost, a life he hadn't been able to save. But this time was different. He had saved Ethan. And looking at the boy now, alive, breathing, safe, something inside Frank finally let go. Daniel looked up from the chair beside the bed, exhaustion lining his face, but his eyes were clear, lighter than they had been in years. "You should tell him you're here," Daniel said quietly. Frank hesitated, then stepped inside. As if sensing the presence of his rescuer, Ethan's eyes fluttered open, hazy with sleep. His gaze landed on Frank, and for a moment the boy simply stared, then a small, tired smile. "Hi, mister," Ethan murmured, voice groggy but steady. Frank's throat tightened. He managed a nod. "Hey, kid." Ethan shifted slightly, looking at him with a quiet certainty that only a child could have. "You saved me," he said. Frank let out a slow breath, nodding again. "Yeah, I did." Ethan blinked at him, considering something. Then he lifted a hand from beneath the blanket and held it out. Frank looked at the small hand for a long moment before carefully taking it in his own. For the first time in years, his fingers didn't shake. Daniel watched them, something deep in his chest finally settling. He had spent years chasing the wrong things. The corner office, the million-dollar contracts, the late nights spent building an empire. None of it had ever mattered. Not like this. He had already made his decision, had already handed over his work to someone else. The life he had built was nothing compared to the one sitting in front of him. From now on, Ethan came first. There would be no more missed moments. No more, maybe laters. Outside, the winter wind howled, but inside this room, inside this moment, there was only warmth. Ethan's hand still rested in Frank's. His father still sat beside him. And for the first time in a long time, everything was as it should be. The first touch of spring had melted away winter's grip, leaving Willow Creek Park bathed in golden light. The ice was long gone, the lake once again a shimmering mirror, reflecting the endless blue sky above. The wind, once sharp and merciless, now carried the scent of fresh earth, the sound of birdsong woven through its gentle hum. Daniel walked beside Ethan, their steps slow, unhurried. No meetings to rush to, no deadlines pressing in. Just time. Time that once slipped through his fingers like sand, now held firmly in place by the boy beside him. They stopped at the lake's edge, the place where everything had changed. Ethan stood still for a moment, staring at the water. Not with fear, not with pain, but with something quieter, understanding. Then without a word, he bent down and picked up a smooth, flat stone. Daniel watched as his son rolled it between his fingers, testing its weight. With a flick of his wrist, Ethan sent it sailing across the water. One skip, two, three, a small ripple, then stillness. Ethan let out a slow breath, a breath that belonged to him. "I'm free," he whispered. Daniel felt his chest tighten, not with grief, not with guilt, but with something lighter. He nodded, swallowing against the emotion rising in his throat. "Yeah," he said softly, "you are." Ethan turned to him then, smiling, not the hesitant, uncertain smile of before, but one full and true. Daniel reached for his son's hand, and Ethan took it without hesitation. Together they turned from the lake, walking forward step by step, not looking back. Because for the first time in a long time, the past no longer held them captive. They had survived, and now finally, they were free. This story isn't just about survival. It's about second chances, about learning that no matter how much time has been lost, there's always room to start again. Daniel made mistakes. He let life pull him away from the things that mattered most. But in the end, he chose differently. He chose his son. And Ethan found something even greater than survival. He found his voice, his strength, his freedom. We all have moments where we face our own darkness, our own regrets. But like Ethan and Daniel, we can choose to step forward. What does this story make you think about? Have you ever had a second chance that changed everything? Let's talk in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe, because sometimes a single story can change everything.